The chapter on New Historicism is an important chapter for us to read in regards to how to apply a historical perspective or critique to a piece of literature. I wanted to go over it a little bit because I think that this is a little reductive. It gives us the skeleton of the approach, but there's a little bit more to it. And I just want to make sure that we get those nuances. I think sometimes it can seem like it's reduced if you just do a quick reading of it and think, oh, well, it's just, providing some biography. It's giving a timeline of events. It's a scavenger hunt of historical things that occurred that I can just kind of fold into an essay and say, historical perspective done. And it's not that simple. We can't look at it as just like, hey, this happened at the same time this was written, kind of see where this is kind of going. But it's understanding that it's not just something that happened at the same time, but it's a product, it's a participant within that historical structure. We have to think about it in terms of that. Like, how does this reflect the values, the anxieties, the conflicts, the institutions, the power structures of the time? How is this all working around it? It's not just something that happened, it's something that's participating within that. It's a product of that. And so there is a lot more dynamic overlay within that. So it's more than just finding historical things that we can kind of tack to it, right? We're looking at the historical context and the pressures that that puts on this, right? It's what are the assumptions of things that seemed normal? What tensions are bubbling up underneath this? Whose voices are centers? Whose voices are centered? And whose voices are muted, right? What are the institutions of power? And how are they organizing this at the time? So there's a lot to it. And we have to kind of, look at it more within the context of this, not just simply that these facts, and I feel the chapter goes beyond that, but I really want to make sure that we're looking at this as a product, as something where the literature and the author are participating in it and then saying something about it. It's still a product of it, but at the same time, it is actively within that. The historical construct of it, when you're looking at just like this is new historicism. Oh, well, what about the historical historicism or old historicism? The old historicism idea was just simply looking at the context historically, and it still involves all of the nuanced people of power, the institutions, the driving forces, the zeitgeist, right? We get into that, and kind of how all of it is shaped historically. But the new historicism aspect, and I'm not sure this chapter goes over that much, is considering how we currently look at historical events as like kind of like a web with competing viewpoints that is much more fluid and dynamic. And it's not just a product of a dominant culture that looks back with retrospective analysis and says, this is what I say happened, but trying to evaluate the new historical interpretation of this construct of events and kind of the competing dynamics that are at play. And it's not just simply the story being told by the winners of history, so to speak, the writers of history, but really looking at it as a much more dynamic construction of competing ideas and friction, and taking that and saying history can sometimes be messy. And so, if we're going to really look at it and evaluate it from a historical construct that is of competing voices, then what does that say about the literature? So, there is some suspicion with new historicism because it can seem like it itself is overly suspicious, that it's consistently saying, well, is everybody being represented? Are we looking at all of the perspectives in this? And what are some of the parts of history that we're kind of clean washing to kind of hide some of the dirtier aspects from it? And how is our interpretation of the literature um, being misinterpreted or misunderstood from that? And so the historical criticism is much more dynamic. It's much more fluid. It's much more of a construct. And it is, again, kind of considering how this is not just a product, but a participant within that specific time period. And it is a dynamic reading of it. So it is much more than just saying something like, well, um, the Industrial Revolution, right? They created this long train that went across the country, obviously driving force for this whole story. But instead looking at how the Industrial Revolution shaped things, how it changed culture, how it had a real strong interplay into the dynamics of all aspects of society, and how it marginalized different people or groups, and where this piece of literature falls in with representation of all of that. Anyway, my point is that it's a lot more than just saying this happened during this piece of literature's production. There might be some interplay and actually trying to analyze it. So um, it's a very effective chapter. I do like a lot of what it's saying, but I just want to make sure that we're understanding the dynamic aspect of it and that it just goes beyond historical placement. Thanks.